you've downloaded the Buckeye Leafcast, featuring two guys who have absolutely no idea what they're trying to say.
If he has a good offense, he has a good... I'm sorry, let me say it again.
All right, let me think here what I was going to say. I don't know what the hell you want to call him over the
What'd I say?
I was going to say something, and I don't know.
I don't know what it is you're saying, but I like it.
And now, here are your hosts for the Buckeye Leafcast, Andy Evans and the Intergalactic Buckeye Fan himself, Mr. Chris Stefanick.
All right, Buckeye Nation. Hey, this is Chris Stefanick bringing you your weekly Leafcast. The esteemed Mr. Andrew Evans is not able to join us this week. He's a little under the weather, so I'm holding down the fort for you all, bringing you delicious updates on our Buckeyes. Now, 6-0 Buckeyes heading into a bye week. Pretty awesome. Halfway through the season. I cannot believe the season is halfway over. But just came off a 34-10, very, very solid win over a pretty solid team, a flawed team in the Michigan State Spartans, coming into the game at number 25 in the country. Not a very great offensive team, but a solid team, a really good defense, rugged defense. And the first test for the Buckeyes, coming into this game, they've basically not faced adversity. They've been awesome at everything they've done. They've very early jumped on top of teams, and it's been just cake from there. Even if there was they had to punt a few times in a row or whatever, they were doing it after having, a 3 or 4 touchdown lead, right? So this is the first time they came out, had a struggle the first quarter. Michigan State is a very physical team. They're the team that's going to try to get you into a slugfest. And they came out and punched Ohio State in the mouth. I mean, I thought in particular, Michigan State's defensive line came out and punched Ohio State's offensive line in the mouth. For the first time, the Ohio State's offensive line just didn't dominate from out of the gate. First 5, I mean, that's been one of the things that's got me the most excited about this Ohio State team, other than just the fact that they're basically haven't shown any weaknesses. They're all around so good. One of the things that has me the most excited is just how dominant the offensive line has been. If you have a dominant offensive line, I mean, that's going to be hard to beat. That's going to win you a lot of ball games, and you've got a dominant offensive line. And they've been dominant, and they came out. But I questioned. I was like, hey, the schedule, they don't have any world beaters they've played, right? I mean, their strength of schedule is not bad. I just looked it up. The computer rankings for strength of schedule had, as after yesterday, after playing Michigan State, had Ohio State as the 19th strongest schedule in the country. That was the Sagarin ratings. Somebody else, I sent it to a buddy of mine, and he actually sent me one back where they had Ohio State top 10 strongest schedules in the country, which I thought was pretty high. I'm not sure where he got that from, but Sagarin had them at 19 in the country. But if you looked at the top 10 teams by ranking, the only team that had a stronger schedule statistically was Auburn. So, even, Georgia is oh, we played Notre Dame, we've got this big win over Notre Dame. That's a pretty good win, remains to be seen if that's going to actually be a better win than the Michigan State game. Michigan State comes out the next 2 weeks and beats Wisconsin, beats Penn State, ends the year, 10-2 kind of regular season. That might be just as good as looking as that Notre Dame victory, depending on how Notre Dame closes out with, who they have left on their schedule. Still have USC, Michigan, whatnot. But at any rate, getting sidetracked, the strength of schedule for Ohio State is not bad, but is it great, right? Is it great? And so I it's not, no. So I'm like, okay, what do we really have? They've been destroying people, but is that maybe just a function of the schedule's just not been that great? So, last week played Nebraska. Nebraska's actually a pretty decent offense. They have playmakers. They have good athletes. They've recruited well. a dynamic quarterback, some dynamic players at different positions. Spielman's kid, I can't remember his name, Rondale something or such, but they've got playmakers, right? And Ohio State just shut them down. So I was like, okay, I feel pretty good about the defense. The defense, I think, is actually legit. We know that's a pretty good offense. Nebraska's a flawed team, right? They don't really have much of a defense, but they got a pretty good offense and shutting them. Well, this week I'm like, okay, Michigan State's a flawed team. They don't have much of an offense, but they do have a really good defense. Let's see if our offense is legit. First quarter, I'm like, wow. Well, this is interesting. Maybe our offense isn't quite as dominant as I thought it was. Maybe this isn't the greatest Ohio State team ever, like some people were saying, through 5 games. Because, well, let's face it, through 5 games, it had the look of one of the greatest Ohio State teams ever. That was as dominant of the first 5 games as I've seen from Ohio State since probably 2006, Troy Smith's Heisman Trophy run. That regular season stretch for Ohio State was pretty darn dominant. Especially through 5 games. They had a tight game against Michigan there at the end and the like, and of course didn't do so hot in the postseason, but through 5 games, they were pretty dominant. This team was, this team certainly looked a heck of a lot more dominant than the 2014 national championship team, right? And that team had a ridiculously dominant offensive line by the end of the season. So, they're, by all accounts, they're ahead of that, as far as the schedule goes. But did we really have that good offensive line? Michigan State comes out and, it was pretty ugly that first quarter. Ohio State didn't do a whole lot of, what did they have, like 12 yards the first quarter? Lots of punts. I think there was a turnover maybe in there. Trying to remember when the sequence of events, how all of that went. So, questioning it. Then second quarter came out and just, annihilated them. A 24-10 second quarter. They had more yards in the second quarter versus Michigan State than what Michigan State was giving up on the season coming in. So, pretty impressive. I guess speaking of some of these numbers, the Ohio State put up 529 yards on Michigan State. I think they were giving up maybe 280, 290 coming into the game. 529. Not bad. Rushing, 323 yards rushing. I think Michigan State was averaging 55 yards a game. 55 yards a game, and Ohio State put up 323 on them at 6.6 yards a clip. So, pretty good. You're going to win a lot of ball games if you're getting 323 yards on the ground at 6.6 yards a clip. So, let me just flip over and look at how that looked player by player. So, that was J.K. with 172, 7 yards a clip. Master T tossing in 90 at 6.4 yards a clip. And Justin Fields, 61 yards, 5.5 a clip. Both JK and Justin with TDs. Now, Justin Fields, the only quarterback in the country with a rushing touchdown and passing touchdown in all the games. I know after week 5, you could say that about him, so certainly you can say it about him after week 6. He continues to impress. But yeah, so what do I think about this team after this Michigan State? The first time they were tested. They won by 3 touchdowns, 34-10, 24 points. That's a solid win. But they were, for the first time, tested. I think they were tested a little bit on both sides of the ball. And, I heard an analyst say, he said, this was beating Michigan State 34-10. It was better to do that than it was to beat them 60-0. And the logic was, if you beat them 60-0, people would just dismiss Michigan State as another weak opponent on Ohio State's schedule. Be like, the Big Ten's crap this year. We still don't know if Ohio State's any good because they haven't played anybody. But if you beat them 34-10, you're like, oh, Michigan State's good. And they won a contested game. They came in. Anybody who watched the game would be like, hey, that was a dogfight. They fought them. They came in there. They were feisty. They had to fight for it. And, their challenges were raised, and Ohio State met those challenges, right? So they're like, 34-10 was actually better than 60-0. Now, if that's actually true, That's some bullshit right there. So I gotta say, come on, man. It was actually better to beat a team 34-10 than it was to beat them 60-0. Come on now. But I kind of get what they're saying. You know, as we were going through the season, one of the things that did have me a little nervous was Ohio State had not, to this point, been tested. They'd not had to face any adversity. And sometimes when you face adversity, you fold. You know, you want to see what happens to you when you face adversity. Are you gonna fold? Or are you gonna step up to it? Or are you gonna step up to the challenge? And you want the first time you face adversity to be versus a team that you can handle some adversity and still come out with a W. Because that's, at the end of the day, that's the most important thing, is you need that W, right? We would much rather not be tested and have a W than be tested and lose and be like, well, but at least we were tested. And it's like, no, you want the W. But if you can get it tested and still get the W, then that's a pretty good thing. So I think, you know, you want to, when you're going through the season, there's a series of boxes you want to get checked off. And one of them was, hey, faced adversity and didn't crumble. Faced adversity, stepped up to the challenge, met it, and, you know, succeeded. So we can check that off. Another thing you wanted to, another checkbox is, had to play 4 quarters. You know, this team hasn't had to play 4 quarters up until yesterday. So that's another checkbox. So while I personally would still give me the 60-0, you know, just let Ohio State come out and just demolish you, melt your face off, dominate in all aspects. I'll take that any day of the week. But we did at least get these, you know, couple boxes checked. And I do feel more comfortable now. You know, I mean, I don't expect Ohio State to every single game win by 40 points, you know, which was what they had. I think they'd won by over 40 points the first 5 games of the year. Yeah, that's not going to happen all season long. And I do feel more comfortable heading into games versus the Wisconsins, Penn States, Michigans of the world. Having seen Ohio State get punched in the mouth, having seen the offensive line, you know, get their manhood tested, and then step up to that challenge and answer it. So feeling pretty good about this game. I mean, honestly, coming into the season, if you'd have told me in July, you know, Ohio State was going to be 6-0 with 5 games that they won by over 40 points, and their closest game was a 24-point victory over the number 25 team in the country, I think I'd be pretty happy with that. And anybody who would not be happy with that, you probably need your Ohio State fan card revoked. You need your college football fan card revoked because you don't understand just how good that is. So, especially, you know, new coach, 4 new starters on the offensive line, new QB, whole new defensive staff, whole new defensive scheme. A lot of returning players on defense, don't get me wrong, but it was a lot of returning players coming back from a defense that was, you know, historically one of the worst defenses ever for Ohio State. By some historical measures, was the worst defense by Ohio State ever. So yeah, feeling pretty good. At this point, this team looks complete. The schedule is, you know, by at least the Sagarin method, is number 19th in the country. That's not, you know, second best schedule in the top 10. Second hardest schedule in the top 10 right now. So, you know, I mean, Cincy just beat Central Florida. That's looking like a pretty good win. Yeah, I mean, Miami is the only team in that schedule that's trash. And let's not forget that Miami game was supposed to be TCU, and TCU backed out. And then at the last minute, Ohio State had to try to find somebody to fill that slot, which people book their schedules for college football years in advance. So when you have a very short window to fill it, there's, you know, you kind of have to take what you can get. So there's not a lot of options available when you're like, need to find a game 1 or 2 years out, which is what they were looking at with the Miami, Ohio game. But I mean, just imagine how strong their schedule will be looking if they had TCU instead of Miami. Then at that point, I don't think anybody would be saying anything about Ohio State's schedule. But I mean, a lot of this is all beauty contest anyways. Right now, the Big Ten has the exact same number of undefeated teams as the SEC. So the only reason these teams are ranked ahead of the Big Ten teams. You look in the SEC, and there's so many SEC teams ranked really high. It's not because they have more victories than the teams in the Big Ten. It's not because they have less losses than the teams in the Big Ten. It's just because beauty contest, and they're perceived to be stronger. Some of that might be the case. Some of that might not be. But, it's like Florida and Auburn. Look at what a great matchup that was between two top 10 teams. And I mean, Florida and Auburn are good teams, don't get me wrong, but I don't think they're great. Are they top 10 teams? I mean, I think it's probably just SEC bias that, well, they're good teams in the SEC, therefore they must be top 10 teams. And I'm not so sure I buy that. So, a lot of games yet to be played. It's still very early, even though it's 6 games in or halfway through. A lot of teams still haven't really gotten into the meat of their schedule yet. Like, Ohio State has only played one of the really top teams on the schedule. I still put Penn State, Wisconsin, and Michigan. Penn State and Wisconsin for sure as tougher games than Michigan State. And Michigan might be a tougher game than Michigan State as well, too. So this, Michigan State, toughest game to date, but still lots more tough ones to come. So, although next week they will have a bye week, and then they have Northwestern. It's in Evanston, but coming off a bye, I mean, Northwestern does not look good. I'm sorry. And Northwestern is very offensively challenged. I mean, I know they gave Wisconsin a game, but they do not have the kind of offense to keep up with Ohio State. I mean, what's the best case scenario? What can Northwestern do to Ohio State's offense? I mean, barring like an 8 turnover kind of implosion, can Northwestern hold Ohio State to 34 like Michigan State? I don't know. And even if let's just say for the argument they can. Let's say they can hold Ohio State to 34 like Michigan State just did. Can Northwestern score 34 points on this Ohio State Buckeye defense? No, there's no freaking way they can. So, I think Northwestern's going to be lucky to get 20 points. And I'm sorry, they're just not going to be able to stop Ohio State's from putting 20 points on the board. They're going to be lucky to get 20 from their offense, and their defense is not going to be able to keep Ohio State under 20. It's just not happening. So next week, I think next week's going to be another, they're going to annihilate Northwestern. This is going to be one of these, I haven't thought about a score, so I'm kind of being put on the spot here, but minimum 4 touchdown victory. So 28 points, minimum 28 point victory. I'm saying for this Northwestern game. All right, so let's talk about some position groups. I think any conversation about individual players with Ohio State has to start with Chase Young. Amazing. Best player on the team, maybe best player in the country, regardless of position. I mean, people are talking about Heisman votes for this guy. He did not statistically have his best game yesterday. He had, I want to say 4 tackles and half a sack, something like that. But several of the other sacks that other players got were a direct result of him. So like the Baron Browning sack, which was awesome. But the Baron Browning sack, I'm like, this is a great play. They line Baron Browning up on the outside shoulder of Young, and like Chase Young gets doubled, and Baron Browning just like has a free pass to the quarterback, and just, he's such an athletic freak that Browning just annihilates Lewerke. So, but he does not get a free pass if Chase Young isn't being double teamed, right? And there were several others like that. I mean, I remember, what's the big number 9 defensive tackle for Ohio State? I can never remember this guy's name. Son of a gun. Let me just look at Jashawn Cornell. That's who it was. Jashawn Cornell had a sack, but I think it was one of those where Chase Young flushed Lewerke forward in the, out of the pocket, and then that changed the angle for the blocks, which then, allowed Cornell to come off his block and get the sack, that sort of thing. But I think I think the fumble on the pitch from Michigan State, that was also impacted by because Chase Young just came in, basically completely unblocked, destroyed the guy across from him, came in unblocked, and messed up the timing of that pitch, leading to the fumble. So his fingerprints were all over the game. Tyreek Smith back, looking healthy, had a great sack. Jonathan Cooper in there, he was rotating in. That defensive line is just sick. Zach Harrison, oh my God, that guy looked like a freak. So, I was thinking about this. I was like, Ohio State has been really fortunate. When was the last time we didn't have a Bosa or a Young on the field? And it's been a long time. It's been, I think, 2012 maybe was the last time we didn't have a Bosa or Young on the field. I want to say it was the 2012 season. And I'm like, man, this year was going to be the first year without a Bosa since 2012. And I was pretty sad about that. And then Chase Young comes out and let's face it, he looks even better than either of the Bosas at this point. Neither of the Bosas look this as good as Chase Young has been this year, as dominant as he's been. Neither of the Bosas were this dominant in college. So it's like, we lose Bosas, we got a guy who's even better. And I'm like, oh God, what are we going to do next year? Because Chase Young's obviously gone. Now it's going to be the first time without a Bosa or a Young. And I'm like, man, that Zach Harrison kid, I don't know. He gets a year of seasoning. There might not be any drop off from Young to him. As crazy it is to say that. I know that coming out of high school, this kid, and he's a true freshman. I want to say he was there in the spring, but he walked onto campus 6'5", 260, and runs like a sub 4.5 40. So physically, that's just unnatural. That's a complete freak. Physically, that's as good, maybe better than Chase Young. The physical gifts, he's not lacking in physical gifts for sure. So at that point, he was supposed to be raw, and I really didn't expected him to blow up and be awesome as maybe a junior after he had a few years under Larry Johnson's tutelage. We're 6 games into his freshman season, and he looks like the second best defensive end out there. Granted, maybe I'm overreacting to a good game. This was his best game to date. Tyreek Smith, when Tyreek Smith is healthy, looks awfully darn good. We've seen Jonathan Cooper in the past flash some moments of brilliance here and there. Just never really put it together, play after play after play, game after game kind of thing. But I'm like, man, maybe we don't have a big drop off next year when Chase Young leaves, as crazy as that sounds. And then they got the number one defensive end in the country the year after that. Jiminy Criminy. And to take over for Zach Smith, or Zach Harrison rather, when he leaves. So, anyways, defensive line ridiculous. Linebackers, I gave Pete Werner a lot of crap, and even coming into the season, I said one of the things I didn't like about the bullet was it meant that you were taking Werner off the field. So, we talked about this before, but quick recap. In this new defense, you either play 3 cornerbacks and a safety. So Shaun Wade, Jeffrey Okudah, Damon Arnett, and then you got Fuller back there at safety. And 3 linebackers. Or you bring the bullet in, which is just what they call the strong safety, and you go 2 linebackers. So what happens is Pete Werner comes off the field and Brendan White comes in if you want to go 5 defensive backs. And most of the time, they're sticking with 4 defensive backs and 3 linebackers. So I said, coming this year, I'm like, I don't like this. Brendan White is clearly a better player than Pete Werner. And the thing that they're doing with this bullet means that you're taking snaps away. Strong safety used to be out there in the base defense. And I'm like, now you're taking snaps away from Brendan White to have Pete Werner out there. And I'm like, I think I owe Werner an apology. He looks really good. I'm like, man, I was blinded by the past, what he did last year. And the whole defense looked terrible last year. But all the linebacker, well, I guess Malik Harrison was all right. But, the linebackers didn't look good. A lot of the people on this defense didn't look good last year. Pete Werner, not only does Pete Werner just look like, he's an acceptable person to put on the field wearing an Ohio State uniform. He's an acceptable, he's not like a glaring weakness on the defense. No, he actually looks kind of good. He's like, he doesn't look like he's ready to be an All-American and not about to plant a tree in Buckeye Grove, but he looks pretty good. He might actually get some all-conference considerations. I don't know if they'll be first team or anything, but he might make like a third team All-Big Ten this year. He looks pretty good out there. So, and what I've seen of White, does he look better than Werner? Not really, no. Warner looks pretty good out there. I guess while we're on the linebackers, Tough Borland, somebody I've been hard on in the past. He looks better this year. Don't get me wrong, he looks better this year. But one thing I will say is Baron Browning just clearly looks like the better player at this point. And they're rotating. Last I saw, the snap counts was about 50-50. So Tough Borland is listed as the starter, or maybe there's an or. I don't remember if it's Tough Borland is the starter and Browning is the backup, or if they have an or between them where they're technically both starters. But on the first snap of the game, which means you're a starter, it's always Tough Borland out there. Well, and it really is like they're both, even if Tough Borland is out there, it really is they have two starters because they're splitting the snaps 50-50, and it's I know a lot of people subscribe to the thing. It's not who starts the game. It's who do you trust to be in there at the end of the game. That's a big thing in the NBA. I'm personally a big NBA fan, but people talk about all the time the starters and like, yeah, but it's really more important who's out there in those last 5 minutes of the game. Who do you trust out there? What's that lineup? That's really your top lineup, that lineup that you have out there in the last 5 minutes of the game. It's not the starters. So kind of a similar thing, but really, honestly, though, every snap that you're giving to Tough Borland is one you're not giving to Baron Browning, and he's not as good. So you're downgrading your defense, putting a player who's not as good out there. Now, I'm not saying that you go 100% snaps to Browning and 0 to Borland. I like the rotation that they've got at most of these positions. A whole bunch of the positions out there for Ohio State, they rotate players and it keeps guys fresh. It gives a lot of guys experience. So if there is an injury, Browning went down, Borland would be well seasoned. But it doesn't need to be a 50-50 split. Let it be like 70-30, 80-20, where Browning, whenever he needs a blow, Borland comes in. Maybe do it situationally, where if it's more of a passing down, you want Browning out there. But if it's not a pass, if it's running down, you let Browning get a little bit of a break. But let the break down and snap count be like 70-30 or something. Come on, guys. It's obvious Browning is the better player. So, to this point, Browning's had a great season and looks like he's got a future in the NFL. He looks really good. The only really glaring mistake that I saw Browning make was that Adrian Martinez run last week where he had the angle. It would have been like 5 yard or less carry for Martinez if Browning makes the right angle, and he just took an awful angle. It was reminiscent of 2018 where he was always taking bad angles. And then Martinez got right by him and ended up being like a 60-yard run or something. But, one play. Through 6 games, he's got one bad play. I guess, there was that horrible blindside block call yesterday that, I'm no rules expert, but the announcers were saying, oh, that's textbook blindside. I'm like, really? Well, if that's the textbook blindside, then maybe that rule needs to be revisited because what the heck? That would have been a nice little touchdown there on that return called back. So, and interestingly enough, that interception was created because Browning tipped the ball up. He got his hands on it, tipped it up in the air. And, from there, Jordan Fuller grabbed it and returned it to the end zone. But Browning could have pretty easily caught that himself. I guess it's easy for me to say that he could have easily done it, but he had 2 hands on it. If he would have caught that, then he wouldn't have done the block, the blindside block, right? And he also probably could have got pick 6, considering where he caught the ball and the speed that Browning has. So had he just caught the ball rather than tipping it up, that probably would have been a pick six rather than the return called back and then Ohio State gets stopped. So they don't end up scoring. But let's see. I've been talking a lot about the defensive players. Let me just say I did not talk about the defensive backs. They looked really good. Shaun Wade looks amazing. Even Arnett has looked really good this year. He's not looked as good as Okudah and Wade, but he's looked really good this year. And they kind of came out and were picking on him in that game. He had several targets at him versus Michigan State. But he was doing well when they were targeting him. I kind of can't blame him. If your choice is, okay, I got to throw it either Jeffrey Okudah, no. Shaun Wade, no. Or Damon Arnett, well, okay, I'm going to throw it Damon Arnett. And also, even in the past, I mean, Damon Arnett's always been right there, stride for stride, with guys he's covering. But his problem has always been he gets too handsy and gets pass interference calls. So I'm like, throw it at Damon Arnett. Maybe you'll get a pass interference call. But that wasn't happening yesterday, so he did well. And then he went out and that some undisclosed injury, that Day would not say in his tradition, in his typical Ryan Day manner, would not say what the injury was. But Damon Arnett out. Hopefully not too bad. He does have the bye week to come back. I guess while we're talking about injuries, Thayer Munford went down at one point, but he did come back later in the game. And, boy, what a luxury. Thayer Munford goes down. Josh Alabi goes in. They didn't miss a beat. I mean, Josh Alabi, for a sixth man on your offensive line, I mean, you'd be hard-pressed to find a better guy. Went in and started last week for Brandon Bowen. Didn't miss a beat. I mean, they gave him player of the week, offensive player of the week, because he came in and was so dominant and wasn't even, a starter coming into the game. Never missed. Came in for Thayer, didn't miss a beat. Thayer ended up coming back, so I'm assuming it wasn't too bad of an injury, whatever it was. But Munford did come back, and basically nobody even noticed, because why would you? I mean, they're like freaking, stormtroopers in there. One guy goes down, another guy steps right in, looks just like him. So the offensive line, like I said, they did get punched in the mouth, but then they responded. Sorry, just taking a drink of tea right here without having my partner Andy with me. I have to do all of the talking, so it's like normally I have a chance to drink my, click on the mute button and take my tea while Andy's talking. But at any rate, the offensive line, like I said, they were challenged the first quarter, but they came back out. And the past, I've always, when I'm watching the offensive line, really looked at like how much push they could get or how much they were being penetrated. I'd watch the line of scrimmage, watch the ball snap. Did they change the line of scrimmage? Were they getting pushed back, or were they moving their guys forward? And watching this year's team being as dominant as they are, one of the things I've noticed, I think what's actually more important than changing the line of scrimmage, although that still plays a factor, don't get me wrong, just getting a hat on a hat, just blocking a guy. I've seen this over and over again where, this team, what they do is they get a hat on a hat. And they don't, a lot of times they do blast a guy off the line of scrimmage, but sometimes they don't, but they still have a hat on him. And what will happen is, they're right at the line of scrimmage. They didn't move the guy off the line of scrimmage, but he's blocked. Ball gets handed to JK. JK runs right by that guy because that guy is blocked and can't do anything about it. And I'm like, man, oh man, oh man, is this team good at getting a hat on a hat? And you just look across the board and it's like every silver helmet is up in somebody else's business, occupying a defender. And boy, is it beautiful to watch. And boy, do you see just like lanes just open up. And they are, like I said, this is the first week where they weren't dominant from start to finish. But considering how they're starting, and I just expect them to keep getting better, and they do have a little bit of depth. So if there's injuries, knock on wood, they will be fine. There's the Alabi can step in there. They really like Harry Miller to come in there as well. Petit Ferrer. They like him a lot. They said it was basically almost a toss-up between him and Brandon Bowen at right tackle for that job. Bowen just barely beat out Ferrer, so I don't think there's a lot of drop-off there either if they have to go to that. So they've got 8 guys, and they're killing it. JK, he looks the best he's looked. He looked amazing as a freshman, then maybe not so great as a sophomore. I do wonder how much of that was just the offensive line. The offensive line last year was not getting a hat on a hat. And, the offense was dynamic last year, but it was dynamic because Dwayne Haskins was throwing for 450 yards a game, and he had those amazing wide receivers, and it was all about Dwayne Haskins finding wide receivers downfield. And it was not about running the ball. I mean, they were really struggling a lot to run the ball, and there was a big drop-off from JK from his freshman to his sophomore year, both in yardage and especially in yards per carry. Went from 7 yards a carry to 4. Did he even get 4? Was it less than 4? It might have been less than 4. But he's back up there 7-ish yards a carry this year and looks really good. I guess Mickey Marotti was saying how he went from 12% body fat down to 9. Which, if you know anything about body fat, is amazing. That's pretty cut right there. That is pretty stinking cut. But, basically added power while adding speed, which is really hard to do. And, he's got wiggle, he's got speed, he's a home run threat anytime. You got the 1-2 punch with Master T, the third, coming in there, who reminds me of a Carlos Hyde, big kid, but yet is one of the fastest guys on the team, supposedly the fastest running back. So that looks really good. No drop off the wide receivers, even though you lose Terry McLaurin, Johnny Dixon, and Paris Campbell. These guys, KJ Hill, all he does is just provide us a safety outlet. He's just Mr. Reliable game after game, catch after catch. Let's see, he got 7 catches for 57 yards. So the second best on the team was Ben Victor with 3, but 7 catches for KJ. So he's just reliable. You need somebody to catch the ball. He's there, and he moved into second place all time in catches for Ohio State. So I believe he passed up Chris Carter, and now the only one that he has left is David Boston. Real great chance that's going to happen this season if he keeps continuing at this clip. Doesn't get any injuries or anything like that. I think he's probably going to pass David Boston for all-time most receptions. So obviously, seriously, impressive stats there for him. Ben Victor looks great. I love that little run pass option Ben Victor touchdown that they did. Oh man, that was a great play. Fields rolled out and then sold it like he was running. I mean, he really looked like he was running the way he was holding it. He really sold it. Ben Victor came up and acted like he was going to block. He was selling a run block, and then he takes off running downfield, and then he's wide open. Fields flips it over his head, and oh my God, the athleticism to beat out. There was 2 guys ahead of him that had the angle, and he just turned on the jets. He came up and kind of slowed down and then hit the jets and went right by him to get in the end zone. That was some pretty impressive wheels to do that. I mean, those defenders for Michigan State, they're on scholarship too. And, they don't recruit guys that aren't good athletes to play for, Sparty up there, especially on the defensive side. So what he did to them, making them look foolish. And that play call was just great. I want more of that, please. Yes, please. I guess while we're talking about play calls, how about the coaching? I mean, the adjustments in this game, the Ohio State came out and offensively looked a little sluggish. The offensive line getting beat up. Play calling maybe a little timid, a little conservative. And then they switched it up. They adjusted. Under Urban, it was you had to wait till halftime to see an adjustment. They couldn't make an adjustment in the middle of the game. And God forbid if the other team switched something up at halftime and came out in the second half and found something that was working, I mean, Ohio State would not address it till like the following week, so you were just screwed. You had to finish the game with whatever it is they were doing. It's like they just mid-game couldn't make adjustments. But you see this Ryan Day staff and these guys he's got around him, they're making adjustments. So the offense makes adjustments and comes out and has that blazing second quarter. Last week, Nebraska comes out and starts running an option, something they hadn't done in years. They're running an option. It's working. They get 3 or 4 plays where they're just like, in Ohio State's like, holy shit, what do we do? We've not seen this before. Ryan Day says, do you need a timeout? So Jeff Hafley's like, yes, sir, please. Calls a timeout. They fix it. Nebraska tries it. They shut it right down. I mean, it took them like a minute. Nebraska got to run it 3 or 4 times. They adjusted and that was it. Closed the door on it. So, I mean, they're making adjustments fast. They're, let's face it. I mean, Urban got outcoached a few times. I mean, I love Urban and it's hard to fault Urban when the guy loses 9 times in 7 years, right? I mean, that's just insane what he was able to do. But he did get outcoached a few times. He wasn't exactly on the bleeding edge of innovation. When he was younger, he was on the bleeding edge of innovation. The stuff he was doing at Utah and then took to Florida, he was running really innovative offense. It's not innovative anymore. Everybody knows that. Everybody knew what he was doing. They'd be like, here you go. JT up the middle, It's like everybody knew what he was doing. People know what Ryan Day is doing. This guy is making adjustments. He's giving all kinds of crazy looks. And even on the defense is the same way. The defense is giving all kinds of looks and they're making adjustments on the fly and not having to wait till halftime. So I'm loving what the staff is doing. I'm loving them. I think like Ryan Day himself was a home run by Gene Smith. And the staff he's put around him, it's just like home run, home run, home run. I'm thrilled with it. I'm thrilled with the staff he's got and what the job they're doing. And I mean, like the development of these players, the players are all so far ahead of where you expected them to be. I talked about Zach Harrison and how he's so far ahead of where he was expected to be. Now, granted, Larry Johnson's the best in the business, literally the best in the business. But hey, that's happening there. Justin Fields, nobody expected Justin Fields to be this good. I thought he might, maybe would be this good next year. Maybe. He's already this good. I'm like, what the hell is he going to do next year? How do you go up from here? I mean, yeah, I guess he's not perfect every play. He had that one sack that he took for like an 18-yard loss or something. It was like, Jesus, dude, do not do that. Do not do that. Take the intentional grounding if you have to and just throw it away. Don't run backwards 15 yards and get sacked. Or the time when he threw it into coverage and threw the pick or whatever. His first pick of the year, by the way, not too bad for a guy, first ever starter. Took, into his 6th game before he throws a pick. But yeah, I mean, this coaching staff is getting it done. Hartline was an Urban Meyer hire, but I mean, he's looking like, one of the best in the business. Let's face it, back in the Zach Smith days, the wide receivers never seemed to really get any better. And you get Brian Hartline in here and like overnight, these guys got really good. Same thing with the linebackers. Linebackers would come here. I mean, they were regressing under Bill Davis. I mean, Jerome Baker looked really good. And then Bill Davis happened and like Jerome Baker went backwards, So these guys that they have in here, you can see the development, the player development that's happening. Players are getting better as the games goes on, which, it's scary. We're 6 games in, but at the same time, we're only 6 games in. This is just 6 games into the Justin Fields experience. This is just 6 games into the, Mike Hafley implementing his defense. It usually takes a good season to implement when you have a new defensive system, it usually takes about a season to implement it. We're 6 games in and it already looks awesome. It's looked awesome from week 1. I mean, what's by the end of the year? That's typically good teams that are well coached, and it's obvious that this is a well coached team. Teams that are well coached by the end of the year are playing their best ball, which means as good as Ohio State has been, this is not yet their best ball. Their best ball is still to come. And the closest game they've had is a 24-point victory over the number 25 team in the country. I'm excited. I got to tell you, I am excited about this team. I mean, how can you not be excited about it? They're position by position, it's A+. Where's the weakness? Point to me towards a weakness. Yeah, I mean, like literally, like the only weakness I even see remotely close in this team would be like a depth issue at like a quarterback for one. I don't even know if there's any. I don't know if there's even a depth issue at other positions. I'm trying to think here. Like at any, they could probably sustain. I shouldn't say this. I'm knocking furiously on wood as I say this, but I mean they could probably sustain an injury at any other position and not miss a beat because they roll so many guys everywhere else. I mean, I guess the one other player that would be irreplaceable would be Chase Young, just because while they have amazing guys behind him, none of them are playing at the level he's playing at, and he's making all of them better because he draws so much attention. So, you know, they can't really afford to lose Chase Young without a big drop off or Justin Fields without a big drop off. But otherwise, not even depth. I mean, this team, special teams looks good. You know, they didn't like the missed field goal yesterday, but hey, you know, I mean, the field goals they did come back and make another one. They have barely ever have to even kick field goals. Punting has been, you know, I mean, this Chrisman kid has been really good. He's got a monster leg when you need a monster leg, lots of hang time, kicks it in the coffin corner. So let's see here. Chrisman, 4 punts, average of 48.3. None of them were inside the 20, but I don't think that he punted any time from midfield. I think all the punts were really deep, like, you know, deep in Ohio State territory when he's punting. So where you just want to like boom the crap out of the ball and put enough hang time so that they can't return it. And that's what he did. So yeah, special teams looks good. Offense, defense, coaching, depth, recruiting looks amazing. The ship just keeps on rolling down the road. You know, I was looking at the number one player in Michigan's class for 2020, his national rank, and he was, I'm going to make this number up because I don't remember what it was, but it was something like 93rd best player in the country, let's say, right? Oh, that's pretty good. They got the 93rd best player in the country. Well, guess what? If that player was in Ohio State's class, he would be the 9th best player in the class. So Michigan's top player in their class of 2020 is the 9th best player in Ohio State's class of 2020. And the crazy thing about this is that Michigan has the number 2 class in the Big Ten. It's not like Michigan, I'm talking about like, oh, the 9th best player in Indiana's class would be, or I'm sorry, the best player in Indiana's class would be the 9th. I'm like, no, I'm talking about the second best team from a recruiting standpoint, the team with the number 2 recruiting class, and their top player would be 9th. So there's no end in sight. There's no end in sight. You know, Day is recruiting at just as high of a level as Urban Meyer is. Got the kids performing on the field at just as high of a level. I mean, let's not forget Urban Meyer won his first 24 games here. So, you know, he also had a pretty good start at Ohio State. I'm not about to say that Ryan Day's start has been as glorious as Urban's, but my God. Yeah, Urban did win his first 24, but he didn't dominate his first 5 like this. This has been domination, and they look really, really good. So, all right, I think that's probably about all I have to say this week. So, thank you so much for joining the Leafcast. And as we usually say here on the Leafcast, we talk about some of the other stuff we got going on. I've just started making some music. I've got a YouTube channel. My stage name is Zen Large, Zen Large. So if you just go on YouTube and search for Zen Large, you'll find me. Or I'm on Facebook or Twitter under like @the Zen Large. So Zen Large was taken. As Ohio State fans, you'll appreciate this. So Zen Large was taken. So I could go with like Zen Large 2 or the real Zen Large or Zen Large official. You know, there's all these things that people do, right? On Twitter, whenever it's taken. And you don't want to go with like Zen Large 2 or Zen Large 3 or, you know, it's kind of cheesy. But like, so people go with official or real. I'm like, screw that. I'm a Buckeye. I'm going with the Zen Large. So I'm on Twitter at the Zen Large, and same thing on Facebook and so forth. So anyways, Hope you're having a wonderful season. I hope you're appreciating it, enjoying it. And I hope you enjoy the week off, bye week, either whether you decide to sit down and watch football stress-free with no Buckeye game, or get out and do a little something else. The weather is freaking amazing. At least here it is in North Carolina. I'm pretty sure it is in Ohio too. Enjoy it. Oh, you know what? I didn't leave them like we always do. But then again, I don't have my partner, so it's kind of sad. Oh well, you do it for me. OH. I'm really hoping you just gave me an IO there. All right, take care, folks.